Also, after the show is done, it will be posted there. If anybody missed part of the show, they can go back later and watch the rest of it. So we got Gerald and we got Jeremiah joining us tonight.
Hello,
And
hello.
yeah, welcome to the show.
Indeed, gentlemen.
Got quite a lot to talk about. Actually, Bernie was touching on being shadow banned, and my channel I think has been encountering that issue right now because I've been like stagnant as far as like new subscribers between 2,700 and 2,900 I just rolled over today.
They
So
finally let you reach 29. Hopefully,
Well,
it lets you keep climbing to 3, right? The
well, I
algorithm,
should have been.
they'll delete you, right? They'll keep you below certain numbers.
Yeah.
They'll, like mine now, I've been stuck at 94 or 9,400 or 410 is what it's let me up to now. And for the longest time, it wouldn't let me go above 9,370, and it would like delete them back down to that each time, and it's just crazy.
I got you both beat hands down. YouTube will not let me get past. I can't even get to 600 subscribers, let alone 6,000. And now, not only am I losing subscribers, I'm losing views on videos. And if you type in the title of 3 of my videos, they don't come up. There's about 3 pages of other videos that come up, but not mine. So
I had to dig for your stuff. Honestly, I had to go right to your channel directly. So a lot of people out there, if they didn't know who you were, they wouldn't know where to go. So you're losing all the views. It's the algorithm. They're screwing with everybody who's doing this stuff right now, especially anybody that is.
There's these other like bunk freaking supposed free energy channels that come up with a ridiculous design every day that somehow get 1 million fucking views, and it's all shit. Or
they saturate it.
Or it's free energy like specialists that will build and disprove. They'll make a non-functioning, non-working model of like the actual designs that have come out and been proven to work. Such thing as like the Don Smith spark gap generator, the Bendini motor, and a couple others I've seen them do it with and focus on. Also, the Keshi.
For sure. Any of that stuff is going to get, actually, there's been a few people that have been pulled right off. Actually got banned. Just recently.
Shout out to Jason Verbelli, and it's still a travesty what they've done to him. The amount of science and technology progression that they have withheld, like stolen from humanity by deleting his 2 excellent YouTube channels over 2 years ago now on these bunk claims about giving false health advice simply from him showing how to make electric or magnetic structured water, and it's absolutely ridiculous, horrible. And shout out to Rebelli. I actually emailed him the link to join. Sadly, he hasn't joined a single one since they did that to him. It literally crushed his soul, and it's travesty. Sorry.
Yeah, he did a lot of good. Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say Jason Verbelli did a lot of good work. I got almost every video he has. He worked with John Cyril for a few years. Like, he knew his stuff. Go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
I think it's just goes to show this is a perfect example. You have to multi-stream your stuff on Rumble, Odyssey, Facebook. You have to diversify yourself. That's the only way you're going to get a footprint out there and get the algorithm working for you again. So if you're just doing YouTube, you're actually making a big mistake by that. You have to branch out to these other platforms.
I agree. I've tried. I've tried to get into every one of those platforms, and I can't seem to get any of my emails back. So I can't get activated. Even on Rumble, I have a channel, but I can't activate it. And every time I get them to resend, it doesn't come. I've changed emails, everything. So am I watched? Well, maybe. When you got it, you got it. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Yeah, yeah, you have to go on several platforms now. Like you have to. There's no choice. There's going to be a time when YouTube's going to totally ban everything that we're doing right now. So you might as well get your footprint out there on other platforms. That's what I
Well, I'm
suggest.
definitely trying. I think I'm gonna go through somebody else's name to put my stuff out there because I think I made a mistake on a live a while back stating that I'm gonna put out tutorial videos on how to build every coil I've ever built once I hit 1,000 subscribers. Because now I can't get past 600. Shouldn't have said that, I think.
But it's a growing trend, and even more so now. Even us guys here, we never thought we would have all the problems. Look at Bernie. How many times did they ban your channel? Twice? 3
Yeah,
times?
it's still twice, and they still haven't given me back my original channel that's like linked to my official university email account that just now when you freaking look it up, oh, banned for pornography. Like, what the fuck, you goddamn assholes.
You know what?
All
I post on the Facebook news groups, and that's where I get a lot of my traffic, actually from Facebook, believe it or not. And
exactly.
lately, and I'm noticing now some of those channels on YouTube are starting to get a lot of spam, like all the porn stuff and all that. And they're deliberately trying to sabotage these news groups, which is a big mistake. It is so bad. Like, come on, leave
I
the news groups alone.
I
You know,
can't
because
access my Facebook ever since my first channel was hacked. My Facebook, all of it's been locked out. I've sent messages and no, I get nothing back. So I've lost my Facebook.
yeah, it's like you have to almost go totally anonymous. You have to go by a total anonymous name. Like, you have to be like almost like a ghost. Like,
Right,
that's
an
what
entity, aka how about a corporation, a business? And I do encourage everybody to create Facebook, Meta, Instagram, as well as of course
yeah,
Rumble, and of course YouTube as well. Multiple different YouTube channel entities, aka corporations. You got to use the corporation to beat the corporation, essentially.
yeah. I'll try to beat them at their own game, right? So
Well, it's worth a
anyway,
shot, but you know.
so guys, where do you want to start tonight? Time travel
Yeah,
experiments.
jump in with both feet right into the deep end.
Seeing
That's
how
right.
time traveled so far from the time we were supposed to start to the time that we finally started, because I finally got it together, we are prepared with what we were originally, I think, going to talk about: how names, etymology, spell binding, and then how it gets into this time bio fields and the science of it. Is that
Well, we could get into that for sure. I did want to go over part of my story somebody had asked me about when I had died, and I didn't go over it in Mike's last live. So I don't know when you
Yeah.
guys want to get into that, but I thought I'd bring that up.
Well, bring it up now. Let's get it out. And
Okay, so the only way that I could really, well, I mean, I could answer questions at any point, but I'll tell the story. I wasn't exactly a good kid when I was young. I was drinking with a bunch of friends. My dad had gone out of town and I had a party at the house, and I drank for like 2 days. So I got into a fight with my best friend, and he ended up leaving the house. But as he was leaving, he closed the screen door, and you know the screen door has glass windows in it, right? So I called his name, and he turned around, and I put my fist through the window and I punched him in the face. But when I had pulled back, I had ripped absolutely everything on my wrist except for my pinky tendon. So every vein, every
insta
tendon.
karma for drunk young foolishness?
Yep,
But
and I got what I deserved, right? So here I am bleeding. I had enough alcohol in my system where I really shouldn't have made it. So I had gotten brought up to my brother's room. They laid me down. I looked at my 3 friends and I said, I'll catch you on the flip side. And I passed out. I was done. I died at that moment. The funny part is I was having a party. And when that happened, the ambulance was called and everybody was coming out of the party like they were leaving. People that were leaving stripped the ambulance. So the 2 ambulance attendants came in with their bags, and as everybody was leaving, they stripped the ambulance and ran. So the 2 attendants that were there, between the 2 of them, they had been on the job for like 25 years. And all they had was their bags with them to do their work on me. So they brought me back to life. But in between that, when I had passed, I entered into like absolute blackness. Like you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. I could feel my face, but I couldn't see my hand. I couldn't see anything. There was no light whatsoever. And I called out. I said, what about God? What about Jesus Christ? And all of a sudden I'm standing at the end of this hallway, and there's this door at the end, and it's beaming light out of it, and this woman comes out of it, and she was my dead grandmother. I know everybody's heard a story like this. And she says to me, you have to go back. There's something you have to do. And I was like, I don't want to go back. I'm home. She says, no, you have to go back. And she touches my shoulder, and instantly it felt like I was coming down and floating through clouds. But as I was going through each cloud, like a level, the first level was pain. The next level was anger. The next level after that was disdain. And then the level after that was, say, maybe greed. And I felt every one of these things, and then my eyes opened up. Well, one eye. I woke up with a black eye and looking up at the ambulance attendants, because apparently after I had passed, my friends were freaked out. The only way he knew how to get me awake, or try to, was to punch me in the face.
Punch you in the face.
Yeah, he wanted to shock me. Like, it didn't work. So of course the ambulance attendants, did their thing. And that is
though the grandma, the ancestor, like when you're younger, and like that's probably the most closest relative to you that has passed, and like generationally, like touching you, sending you back. And then your description of the experience of going through the 7 states of like, and starting with like the pain and then anger and like all like that's just
and
blew
while
my
I was
mind,
standing,
resonated with me. Listen to
while
that.
I was standing at that hallway, I've never felt so much love before in my life. Like, there's no words in the human language to actually explain what I felt.
The embrace, right, that you described, that you were home, right? I don't want to go back. And this just triggered the instant memory of a couple friends of mine that are both tragically now since passed and deceased from opiate overdose. But before that, they had each survived previous overdose attempts. And what they had described to me was that it's like they just saw this light opens up in this tunnel, and this absolute craziest warmth that just keeps calling to you of like, oh, you're home now. You want to come. You want to come. And then something just some sort of memory with the family or something, I think it was, or something that like jolts them back to life, and just like how absolute parallel to what you experienced.
Well, there's a lot more detail to it, but I'm trying to condense it. Like the voices I heard, the laughter, the singing, it was like families playing on a beach, right? It was just amazing. But I was just gonna continue and say how lucky I was for my hand to be saved, because as I got to the hospital, I mean, I'm gonna date myself here. This is like 30 years ago, okay? So as I got to the hospital, there was a surgeon there, the head of think
Are
it's
you willing
thoracic, but
to
I could be wrong.
show your arm on camera like you did
Absolutely.
pre-record? Okay, because like this is
Just to get a
absolute
reference,
proof
right?
that he is either possessed by like one of those Stargate alien things, that like a live eel moving in him, or what he's saying is true. You'll see what I'm talking about in a moment.
Okay, so I'll give a little context before I show my wrist. So because I put my fist through the window and I cut everything, when I was in the hospital, there was I believe it's thoracic, but I could be getting it wrong. He was the head of surgery that deals with veins and tendons, and he was from Johns Hopkins in the States. I'm up in Canada, just so you're aware. And he was doing a seminar at the university. And because I had come in the way I came in, I was the perfect example for him to show his students. So I had to sign a waiver form and stuff like that. I won't get into all the details about that, but once I signed it, they gave me the operation. It took 8.5 hours to rebuild my wrist, and I'll show you the scarring. Let's see if I can get this right here.
I just want to say, Gerald, after this, wow.
Yeah, it's not
There's
really.
there's no way to top this story, man.
So, like, do you get the Stargate alien reference now?
Yes. Here,
What
I'll
is
try and
moving
give you a
under
better.
the skin, son, other than tendons that were restitched together?
Wow. There's no way to top this. It's all over now. That's it for tonight. You know,
Yeah, really.
I'm doing laundry. That's my night. How's that?
Hey, that's more exciting than what I'm doing right now, Tim. So you win.
I'm doing alchemy. Mike's
there you go.
Mike's also doing some free energy. And is now a good time for you to maybe show what you've got set up and do the demonstration?
No, I don't have anything set up for demo tonight, but one thing I did dig up on is one of Eric Dollar's old videos. He did a thing he called energy synthesis. So what makes electricity, what makes energy. And he was talking about back in the day, they had these giant masts and they connect together and it was an opening switch. So whenever they had to shut off the mains from the power station, they had 200,000 volts going through these mains and they would open up like this, open and close. And when that happened, it created a huge arc. Try to imagine this 200,000 volts going through this main switching circuit. When it opens up, it creates this huge plasma.
How much it would weld together? Like what sort of force to take that apart?
Power. You're talking about the power station mains, right? I know what you're talking about.
Yes.
And it goes up in the air, and it's got that. Yeah, that's hardcore.
Right.
I've seen videos of that.
Okay, so the big problem back in probably the early 1900s, 1920, 1930, when they were first designing these things, they were having this issue where extra power was entering the system the second they opened the mains, to the point where it creates such a surge of power, the substation a half kilometer down the road would blow up. So they had a situation on their hands. If they wanted to open up the switch, they would get this huge rush of power coming into the system where at that time they had no idea where this extra power was coming in. So
didn't they refer to them as transient?
No, it's not transient. It's
that was a term they called it temporarily to explain it, of this transient.
Right.
Fair enough. Sorry,
it is. So what they later figured, it was energy coming from the ether. It's coming from the atmospheric energy. When this thing opens up,
static electrical force, essentially.
Well, it's pulling the energy from the atmosphere and bonding and coupling with the arc. And that's why they're getting this huge surge of power. Not alone, they already got 200,000 volts going through it, but to have even more energy flying into the circuit as it's being opened. That's why the substation half kilometer down the road would blow up.
I just had the wildest thought and it comes to how like the electrical differential goes up every meter or whatnot, going up, and like all the ancient
Well,
like cathedral towers with their domes and then their big old antennas on top with it, and that it's the arc, that plasma arc going up into what you just described there, just like the Don
yeah,
Smith's arc gap generator, that when you have these plasma arcs going into the atmosphere, that's where they're able to then pick up the radiant energy into, that they then
yeah,
feed back
yeah,
into the system, that then gives you
right.
your own unity, your free energy,
So
right? It's open
Well,
dynamics.
I can comment on that a little bit here. And so you can read about this in Steinmetz' book, Elementary Lectures on Electric Discharges, Waves, and Impulses. So Charles Proteus Steinmetz writes about this phenomenon. Eric Dollard attempted to correct the mathematics and modify what was not presently in there, which is some of the compressed nonlinear delta T functions. So he found out that when you connect a very large capacitive load, so you have some huge amount of energy accumulated up and it can be instantly discharged. But if you're going to send it down a single wire where you have an open circuit, that single wire acts as an instantaneous infinite capacitor, meaning that the amount of current that can flow into it is effectively instantaneous. Now, just like any kind of disconnect from back EMF of an inductor, the tiny little length of wire that's immediately touching the contactor of the switch when the line is closed with this very high potential, which, by the way, in the case of the electric power stations, it's not being fed from storage capacitors like we would conventionally think. It's being fed from the inductance of the windings of the generator. So when that's connected, it goes through the inductance of the step-up transformer, which has got a huge amount of oomph behind it, and all of that energy is transferred to that line. So in that tiny segment, a huge amount of current flows, far more current than would ever flow through that line continuously. And as a result, the potential on the immediate longitudinal mode transmission down the wire builds up a magnetic flux that has to be neutralized. So the potential on the line, if you say close a switch at 13,000 volts, will actually rise to well over 500,000 volts. And the amount of current behind it is unquenchable, meaning that it will break out into streamers in the air. So think about the pressure wave traveling down it. Imagine like you've got this light beam traveling down and you can see like the end of the boundary. The difference between where the electrons have already started to move, where they're already accelerated, and where they're not moving yet, is very high volts per meter. And that's the condition required to create atmospheric discharge and breakdown, hence why these conductors were reported to have corona and streamers spiking out of them as these switches were closed. And some of these streamers were long enough, several feet in some cases, to zap people standing close by and kill them.
Yeah, several people got killed, they said, especially, at the substation when the transformers blow up. It's a pretty violent explosion. He said they had one incident in New York City that was part of the New York City train transit. Back then it was all electric powered, and it actually made the ground lift up 2 feet off the ground when one of these discharges went off.
I don't doubt that at all. If we think about these like fairly humbling videos of electric arcs between 500 kV distribution lines when they open up their 3-phase contactor switches, and we all see the big old arc, fly out into the air. That's nothing. That is small fries. This pulse is so powerful. It's not an arc. It's not a spark. You've never seen anything like it. This is an explosive electric pulse. One that's so powerful you can feel it from many, many feet away. It hits you like a wave. It's like it's basically like having a blank fired at you.
Is that like a high potential sort of because it's so high, it actually takes some current just in the very movement?
Well, because because the potential rises so fast, it's not really about the maximum voltage, even if it only hits 500 kV. Hell, even if it's only 13,000 volts, if that's 13,000 volts in 1 millimeter, your megavolts per meter is way beyond the breaking threshold.
Yeah. The system wasn't designed to hold that, and it blows up as a result. But kind of go back to my device. That's why I've been using the spark gap switch. That might, have some value to why I'm getting a potential rise that I am by using that make and break switch and getting that arc going at a good speed. It's probably creating a bit of a shock wave, maybe actually helping with the current that's being generated in the coil while I'm getting the inductive reactance. So there might be some connection there. I found that kind of interesting.
Absolutely. We've actually modified that same impulse dynamic into a drive mechanism that we identified as a two-coil system. It's one that's been invented by 13 people throughout history. And we also stumbled across this and then found the other people who had previously come up with it. But yeah, we're going to use that same extraordinary high energy impulse with no place to go in order to create an intense magnetic field. So we're going to redirect it back into the inductance of a loop and use the accelerated electron potential to specifically produce a very, very high intensity multi-Tesla magnetic field over the course of about 1 nanosecond. And that will give us a way higher quarter wave transmission power on our antenna than we could ever achieve with a driving system or a transmitter of any kind.
Yeah. So, like my large renegade device, I put it on the scope, and I was getting about 3/4 of a kilowatt of reactive power coming off the coil cell. And mind you, I'm only putting in a 1/2 watt of power, which is pretty incredible, I think. It's because that make and break is something with the spark gap. And that's why I started using it, because I seen this special property in it that was just making mine different than everybody else's pulse motor out there. Everybody's hung up on using MOSFETs and relay, whatever, right? I'm using a make and break mechanical switch. I'm getting a different effect. So
that, you know,
now,
if you're looking for really fast switching, I remember what was Jeremiah would know about this. They're switching through liquids too. Jeremiah, you remember that? And when you're doing pulse cap, when you're doing pulse cap switching, high energy stuff, and then they have to pulse it. They have a special compound. It's some kind of like a sulfur chemical liquid, and the idea is that you can pulse through it repeatedly and it doesn't break down or change form that much.
Well, you're talking about sulfur hexafluoride suppression gas. It's a standard for arc suppression inside of contactor switches. You can compress it down to a liquid, but otherwise it stays as a compressed gas.
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
That's an incredibly powerful material that does very quickly suppress arcs, but it doesn't switch them in the fastest amount of time. In fact, the fastest material I know of is the one with the lowest band gap transition of them all, which would be hydrogen. Now you can go with direct vacuum, which will technically give you the fastest switching possible, and there you're talking about picoseconds in the double-digit range, which is kind of freaking insane. But if you use a hydrogen switch, you can at least get into the nanosecond range.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the hydrogen. Steinmetz, he designed this special generator back in, it was about 1906 time frame. It's called the dynamotor. So it's like a generator and a motor in one, and they would submerge the entire motor into hydrogen. And they did this. It was able to keep the motor more stable, less air friction, and also keep the generator cold. So yeah, hydrogen has been used in the past in these generator systems. And apparently, they don't use the Steinmetz dynamotor. I was trying to find schematics on it.
Dynamos are fascinating because they're DC generators that were all over the old world, like electrical grid, and used to run everything essentially. But that a couple of channels that dig into like alternative history and just old like cool technology and stuff came up with a whole bunch of different magazine ads from like the late 1800s selling commercialized for the average citizen's home. Like the ads were literally for like Betty Bopp housewife of you connect your dynamo to your house tap or your kitchen faucet to run the dynamo to get your free electricity from running the water through it after you're done your dishes each day. And it will power, and it was to power her nail frickin' file thing that they were like also selling. It was ridiculous, but it was like, I don't know. It was.
Well, there was another one too, the homopolar generator. They also used them in industry, apparently back in the early 1900s.
Oh, it ran all industry.
For welding. While they were using the homopolar generator mainly for the welders, because they needed high current. And the homopolar generators were able to do this pretty efficiently, create enough current to create the arcs that they need to do all the arc welding. So the homopolar generator was used many, many years ago. Now we got modern technology where we don't need that type of a system. We use transformers and step ups and all that kind of stuff. But back in the early days, these were very common. So, and I've actually made a homopolar generator myself, and I was able to get quite a few amps out of it. Actually, it's the most viewed video on my channel. Made my own version of the end machine.
Yeah, do you mind bringing that up so we can share and play that? Let's actually take a look at that, because you've actually stated with me, it was publicly about that experiences having it cause time dilation when you had it running. Was that the machine?
I had a whole bunch of stuff running at that time. I had that running, I had the pulse generator running, and I think I even had a plasma ball in the areas. And the other thing too is I was in the basement of the house, and so I got all this closed space, and I was getting some weird effects. I don't really want to talk about that too much on YouTube because it might get more problems. I'm already getting shadow banned already as it is. But yeah, I was getting some interesting things going on there. Let's see if I can find that video.
Yeah, that stuff usually comes out when you're dealing with static potentials.
Yeah, I had a lot of stuff going on in that room that night. It was unbelievable what I had going on in there. And it was a closed underground space, so it's like almost like in a Faraday cage, right? Let me find the video here. I'm going to post to a private chat, and then you can maybe it's going to be about 20 to 25 amps, but those generators put up very little voltage. It's in the microvolts, but the current was a lot. I have 400 videos on my channel now, so I'm just kind of scrolling through it trying to find it. But we can carry on with other stuff, and I'll post the link, Bernie, in the private chat.
Okay, I get that loaded in a momento. I was also going to discuss a little bit of the alchemy and the plans of new experiments that I'm going to be running, developing it, testing, turning into batteries out of some of the jars and the materials, as well as I've discussed with Jeremiah. He recently encouraged me to get back on this, and it was actually the second YouTube video I ever did. And it was on Leak Project with Rex Bear, but I've yet to get back to it since. Yet it's like literally the most crucial part of my alchemy discoveries, and it's Sir Isaac Newton's color wheel of metal transmutation or transmutational metals, and that it corresponds to what I would call with Jeremiah the oxide and hydride color chart of these electrolysis or metal elements, really, and that I've been able to reproduce consistently, whether it be with just pure copper on copper, zinc on zinc, silver and silver, gold and gold. It doesn't matter what metal it is. What matters solely and keyly is the reaction that is happening within the electrolysis or the electrolysis reaction, and that you within salt water and a very small amount of electrical change can influence a substantial difference in whether you're putting out just like an oxide, dioxide, a trioxide, or hydride. Anyway,
you've got lots of different you've got lots of different input and output chemicals, which is kind of ancillary for electrochemistry, and those things are known. What I was particularly interested in, though, is you did something.
Jeremiah,
go ahead.
I'll start demonstrating it solely, reproducing this and these experiments specifically only in distilled water, so that the specific one salt that I'll use as a standard sort of thing to start creating like pure samples of it or whatever that can then be tested and eliminates all of that. Correct?
What I'm really interested in too, though, is you had several experiments that did anomalous things that are not part of electrochemistry. And so one of those, you had been running some kind of electrolysis experiment with, I think, aluminum foil wrapped around one of the Keshe electrodes that you made. And it ended up producing this material coating, which when exposed, I forget what you did, if you put it in sunlight or if you did something to it, but I guess it had immediately caught fire or flared up or did something that was really catalytic.
That's the red mercurial state, and it's that's what Isaac Newton calls it, the red mercurial state of metal transmutations, and I believe it to be a hydride or hydroxide, but current breakthrough in metamaterials was showing, I forget what the compound was, maybe bismuth or maybe it was phosphorus. I'll have to go back and check, but the point being, it was this red state metamaterial in cold temperatures or room temperatures or whatever, and it was like super conductive, and the main part being that it was just extra hydrogen molecules attached to the metal, and that's specifically what this alchemy is, that you can so easily, it's a whole new type of science.
Right. Well, we're used to burning hydrocarbons too. We burn candles, and we know how that goes, and we can light fuel on fire, and all those things flame out fairly slowly as oxygen reaches the reaction. So these are oxidizing reactions. In your case, what you described was something that was either self-oxidizing or it already had pre-bound, unbalanced molecular chains that were ready to go. And the energy input that it took to get it started versus how quick it went from what you described to me was something I highly encourage you to replicate. Produce that material, and here's why. If that material is in an odd electrical state, so let's say you've got an unbalanced number of valence electrons, but it's somehow bound together because it's geometrically semi-stable, and all it takes to do is destabilize it slightly. Well, that will be a highly energetic polarized state of matter, and that's very useful for electrogravitics because it probably means you have a monopolar charged material which you could pack into a bulk mass, and if you were to hit that with an electric impulse of the same polarity, you would get a repulsion force that would not be balanced because the impulse would only occur during the time where you created it, and off of your transmission structure, the receiving material, that being this special stuff you're making, well, by the time the wave that it produced as a counter-electromotive force comes back to the source of the electric field is stopped, so there's nothing for it to interact with. So it's a one-directional or non-Newtonian force, and that's because it's an open system.
I've got, oh my goodness, another anomalous random jar video to show you right now that I just found, and its relevance being it's that red state material while in water, and so if you see all those white lines in here at the surface, that or just below the surface there at the top, that is all self-organized nanotube structures, and there's no outside electricity going into this jar at all. It's just a nano-coated triple copper coil, like the Keshe.
You got to start building the Moxie generator.
The 3 coils, and then the black nano coating outer cell, and then it's going down 1 copper wire over and down, connecting to another one of these triple solenoids underneath that has aluminum foil wrapped around it. And the bottom here, it's brown, and that's a mix of the half red particles and the half, I guess, orange copper material with it. This is not the right one that I want to show, but that's very anomalous stuff. So, backstory of this jar is that it had been sealed for about a year, and then I opened it up, and then it made all of that self-organizing stuff and started to like bubble and produce hydrogen for several days, if not longer. Frick. This is not the ones that I thought I was good. Sorry.
If you build the Bernie, you should really start looking into the Moxie generator, because if you want to do transmutation, the Moxie generator is what you want to get into. But
Moxie, what it's called.
But you have to be careful with some of the stuff that gives off X-rays, and also some of the metals will generate radon gas. So yeah, be very careful with this stuff.
Specifically why I've held off getting into any of that sort of experimenting yet, but that's literally the next stage of what I need to start doing with taking this cold fusion stuff to the next level, the low energy for sure. What does Moxie stand for again? It's another acronym for a cold fusion process, right?
Well, Fleischmann and Ponce, when they were doing the cold fusion back in the early 90s, they were using a certain metal. I forget the name of it. It's something oxide, but anyways, it produces a huge amount of X-rays. So Ponce and Fleischmann were getting exposed to all this X-rays coming off their device. They were creating a lot of power, but they were also blasting themselves with X-rays. That's why both of them are dead now.
I wonder if the old lead flashings from roofing would be thick enough. Yeah, I have a whole box of those.
Yeah, they are, and so is the lead flashing that used to be installed in bathrooms underneath tubs.
Yeah, that one I think would work as well.
I've used that quite successfully.
And the other thing too is the radon gas. You got to worry about the radon, and if you're going to do something like that, I would be doing it outside where it's a lot of ventilation, because you don't want to start inhaling radon. It's very toxic for you. So
yeah, I wouldn't be doing any of those experiments in my backyard or house sort of thing until I get like a lab or could go get the power source like out in the woods somewhere or something.
Like in the basement of the house where I was, we actually got a test kit, and they come in little jars, and it's got a special, I guess, material in there. When it gets exposed to radon, it will change the color, and they do a test in the lab with it. So you open up the bottle and you just set it on the counter for about 72 hours, put the cap back on, and then send it up for the lab, and then they can tell you the amount of radon gas that's accumulating in your basement. So
you don't want to do an experiment and end up sending it in. They're going to send guys to your door thinking that there's
nuclear isotopes showing up in
So in this one, is this anomalous, or is this like well known that when the anode breaks, that it turns everything's called the yellow sulfur state, and literally all of the oxidized, or if it was white monoatomic state, like any other color, it all just instantly turns yellow within
that's
the
that's
area.
A sign that's kind of the first stage of reactions. There's different levels of stages of the actual reaction. Now, I also found out too, if you take like regular electrolysis and you keep using the same water over and over again, it turns into deuterium, heavy water, which I did not know.
That's a major thing. It's like I'm the times that I have produced this like second and third layers of like literally you can see it like turn into jelly and it just
right.
looks heavier. It's way below.
That's right.
Absolutely.
It's nuts. I have
You just created deuterium,
yeah.
or heavy water.
Now, my
So
question is, once you've gotten to that stage, because I've done that many times, if you keep going, does it turn into tritium?
Yeah, it should. Well, technically, yes.
I'm pretty sure you've gotten some thought tritium too.
Okay, that's a
You're
little
getting
scary. I'll have
close
to make
to
sure I don't do that.
Well, yeah, you got to
Which
worry
colors
because tritium is radioactive.
It was kind of like a milky, like jelly beige.
Yeah,
When
that
I
one
was
only
done with it.
lasts for like a month to 3 months before it turns into something. Usually oxidizes into a blue or something. So
Yeah, I was using a spiral cell with distilled water, and I was running it through a modified Bedini circuit, and wow, I made so much hydrogen. When I would light it on fire, it'd shake the windows of my house.
Yeah, you got to be a little careful with that.
It sounds like shotgun shells when it goes off. It's pretty interesting.
Oh yeah, it's very fast.
really,
Very fast. Oh yeah, it's like a firecracker.
Yeah, even less. It's more than a firecracker because it implodes, and you can feel it in your chest when you're lighting like hydrogen balls on fire. It's intense.
Yeah, it creates a shockwave for sure.
Yeah,
we
make sure your
used
windows
to
are open.
evaporate soda cans with the bookshelf capacitor bank that I had assembled when I was a little kid, living in the bedroom of my dad's house. We had a massive, stupid number of capacitors, 3 bookshelves filled from side to side with these things. And when we hit that, we used to evaporate soda cans almost entirely, except for just little pieces of the curved part on the end, which is the thickest part of the can, and sometimes the tab would survive. Anyway, so here we blew off the windows.
What do you make of this red, white, and blue? Because this is literally just a pure copper coil that is 3 triple rings wired back onto itself and curled back onto itself that was used as a 5-volt anode for about an hour. Then I took it and I just placed it in this cup of regular water. And
well, either one or two things. One, your coil is American Patriot. Or 2, the polarity of the electric field distribution over that gradient is causing a different particle size to predominantly be either deposited or produced. And my guess is
I
that
vote
your
Patriot.
larger particles are sticking to one side.
Yeah, I'm with Tim.
I vote Patriot.
Right?
Yeah.
Can we call it the Patriot particle or the Patriot process if this turns out to be something significant? But it's that this actual red, white, and blue process always forms, and it seems to be polarized. On one end of the field will always be red, the middle will be white, and the other end will be blue. And this is literally just copper, and you're having this magnetic polarization, oxide,
it's
hydroxide.
obviously patriotic. It is obviously patriotic.
Do you use? Have you tried the same experiment with distilled water and get the same effect?
Oh yeah, over and over and over again. This is distilled water. I put this one in. This was actually distilled water. This one was actually distilled water because I was like, oh my god. Because the thing is it'll only stay like this while it's still reactive. Once you pull it out of water and it starts to dry out and oxidize out, then it'll form a blue, hard nano-coated oxidized copper oxide shell around the entire coil on the inside, and that this red inside, so this is red state metal, that it's like physically red, and I suspect that it actually is like in a meta state in that. The white is decay, and it's when it's like eating away process always, and then the blue is the oxidized, and it's always tries to form the final self-organized nano lattice structure that re-encases the metals in the reaction.
You definitely have something going on there, Bernie, because after I was done using my cells, they look like they were deteriorated and rusted and been in there for 20 years. Yours look completely different.
Oh no, it's different things that I can form over and over again. So this right here was close. This is like a silver 1 ounce silver coin that I left the reaction going for a couple months straight, and it waxed and waned. This cloud of monoatomic silver in the silver oxidized rest of the solution would shrink as the lunar cycle waxed and waned, and it like turned into nothing. Let's see. I think I have the photo here. A couple days later. Human.
Oh, Bernie, you know what metal you should try to get a hold of, if you can, is titanium oxide.
Yes. So here you go. Here's right when like the moon was nothing at all, and you can see that there's like literally nothing that was being produced at all, and like it completely oxidized everything up. And then as the moon started to go into full again, sorry, that was a different reaction. See, every time the anode completely corrodes away and breaks off, the entire solution always turns yellow instantaneously. It's strange. Like this blue thing will instantly turn yellow once.
Do you have
Anyways,
do you have a pH meter to test it? See what the pH level of the water is after you do the experiments?
No, I need to start doing those aspects of it.
Yeah, you can order them online. They have electronic ones now that you can actually just dip in the water and it'll tell you what the
It test has
pH.
extremely
I
strong.
use it all the time for like fish tanks and stuff.
I
But
did
is there
test
like
it,
an
Mike.
electronic unit now?
It shows
So
up as
here
an
you can see it's
extremely
starting
strong
to grow
base.
back a bit. That I don't know. I've never tested. It does? Okay. And then where the frick is it? Yeah. The supermoon, and it completely refilled the jar with white silver monoatomics on the full moon that was then the supermoon after it like had gone down to nothing. And then it's like when the moon was giant and it was a supermoon, it literally filled the container with the silver monoatomic the next day. Like it was crazy. So that has blown my mind, and I don't know how the moon affects silver, but it does somehow, and I don't know why the sorry, went on for a little ramble.
Well, and then there's that leftover signature remnant of where the coil used to be placed after it was removed from the system. That still left the spiral, and that means you have to disturb the water and everything in order to take it out, or you have to do something, to affect removing the coil. But it still ended up producing the spiral pattern exactly where the coil was sitting.
So no, it wasn't right where the coil was sitting. It just always happens in the center of the solution. Every time it's like I'll either add water in, or every time I will like restart the electrical connection. The first time it will turn into that spiral as it reorganizes itself.
Yeah, there's a show that you did some time back. We talked about all this in quite an extensive detail with myself and Bob Grenier, and you'd explain the whole thing, and
Yes,
with video clips too. So,
Guys, I gotta bail out for a bit. Actually, I have to log into the other StreamYard account and set up the February conference for APAC. So
awesome, guys.
Sorry, I went on a tangent there, and I was
no worries. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me on, man. Thanks for sending me the invite.
Being here. See, now I completely have a brain fart, right? As you're about to take off. I wanted to discuss a couple of different recordings to set up with you in the future, but I'll just put it into an email.
Yeah,
and
you shoot me an email.
100%, brother.
Okay. Hey, have a good Friday night, guys.
You as well, my friend.
Have a good one.
Yeah, why don't we hand it off to Gerald too? He hasn't gone yet.
Absolutely.
I know nothing.
Come on, let's get technical. Let's talk about
technical about what?
Let's talk about the different types of time. That's a very interesting topic to at least open people up to. That there's this concept that time is not a single construct of simply measuring the refractive index of space, but that there are different ways time can play out in various systems, in matter, in the vacuum, or even in biology. And you had a lot of insights on this. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I believe that time isn't what people think it is. It's a form of a signal, energy. Time is like, okay, so if you explain it kind of like this, right? Like each cell of the human body, if you can picture it as a sphere, and as you're living your life and you're getting older, the cells in your body are starting to deform, maybe go oblong or have some sort of deformed shape, no longer a sphere. What if you could replace those cells, or at least fill those cells back up with a form of energy that brings them back to their spherical form? And I believe that time is a form of that energy. So,
Hey,
go ahead.
question for you. Do you own a DeLorean?
A DeLorean? No.
Yeah. Okay.
I think the
Just
right
gotta
answer,
ask.
Gerald, is not yet.
I have a flux capacitor, though.
So you have the more important part. Now we just need to get you the DeLorean.
That's right. Yeah. And a crazy old gray-haired man. Wait, that's me. Okay, so what if time was like if it was a form of energy that you could impart into the body? So this is a big what if as a thought experiment. If you could have that energy, maybe through sound waves or different forms of well, we'll get into that later. But let's just say, for instance, as a thought experiment, you could replenish the energy in each cell of your body. It would almost be like stopping time. Because as that energy degrades in each cell, if you could replenish that energy, say daily, like let's say you sat in a box or even sat in a single room for 15 minutes a day, and that energy just imparts into each cell of your body, you would essentially be pausing time. So
If you go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
If you'd like, I can